energy crisis that we had, which we made, and of course fighting it with non-market forces causing lines, they came up with the Department of Energy. And it's just another department that has grown and grown and grown. And we can cut through all of it quickly because usually at the end of a segment or at the end of the show, I get to a specific solution. But it's time really to eliminate the Department of Energy. There are things that the Department of Energy does. And for example, some of them are the Nuclear Security Administration, where they spend about $10 billion. The Defense Environmental Cleanup, I guess they still clean stuff up at $8 billion a year. Uranium-related activities, et cetera. They can be put into the Defense Department. And then you've got things that can be put into the Environmental Protection Agency, non-defense environmental cleanup, nuclear waste disposal. They can go into the EPA. And everything else can simply go away. You look back on the Department of Energy like I have now, and go back even just 10 years. It's not just Barack Obama. It is Barack Obama, believe me, President Obama. But even go back to George Bush. I was looking through some documents, and in the 2000s, I never heard of this document, or these documents. But one of them is simply right here, FutureGen. Bet you never heard of this one. FutureGen. There was a Senate stimulus bill back in 2003 called FutureGen. It was President Bush. Now, remember, President Bush wasn't a global climate warning guy. He wasn't totally into alternative fuels or solar panels or whatever. So what did he choose to try to help people out? He chose, from the conservative, quote-unquote, standpoint, but it wasn't conservative at all, he chose the low-emission coal fuel power plant. And so clean coal, in other words. And so they came up with a way to spend, well, they were going to spend, again, every government program we talk about, it's going to spend $1 billion, right? But it's always like $1.8 billion or $2 billion or $3 billion when they're done. So they decided that they were going to figure out clean coal with the Department of Energy. And of course, they located the first site in Mattoon, Illinois. This is an incredible story. But they flushed $176 million away on that site. And they decided that site wasn't the site they wanted. And of course, Dick Durbin, senator out of Illinois, high-ranking guy, he fights to keep this thing in Mattoon, which doesn't produce anything, by the way, seemingly ever. And so you go on for years and years, and the Department of Energy spends over $1 billion to figure out clean coal, and they come up with basically nothing. And I'm getting, we get tired of sometimes of talking about $1 billion or even 40 million. I mean, the people listening to the show, if we were talking personally, by and large, $10,000 would be a great amount of money. $100,000 would be an enormous amount of money. $1 million would be, oh my gosh. But in this show, and when we talk about federal spending, we're always talking about like $1 billion. That becomes $2 billion. And nothing comes from it. And so when you fast forward all the way to 2008, 2009, with this financial crisis. Now the Department of Energy, which basically is a bunch of political people. I mean, the people who end up running it are political people. They're designated that way. It's a full-time secretary appointment. But unlike the Department of Defense, where we get people in, even Hagel was in our Defense Department, was a soldier. And before that, generally we get some people who understand defense and run large organizations. We know we did that under Bush. Reagan did that too. Who've run large organizations. Seemingly the appointments that get put in here, whether it's Stephen Chu, who was Obama's first appointment, or Ernie Moniz, who is now the Secretary of Energy. If you look into their backgrounds and just go through it, I mean, you'll find one. They're all about climate change. This represents Obama's opinion now, right? So he's going to spend money on your money, our money, my money, billions of it on stuff that will stop climate change. When we'll do a whole show on that, when we got to take a more jaundiced view of climate change, especially in the last 5 or 10 years when we found out people have been cheating about it, making up numbers about it, how the world hasn't got warmer, how there weren't any hurricanes this year, basically, how it's freezing cold everywhere you go across the country. Anyway, that's a whole nother show. But whether it's true or not, with such a small sample size, you go through to the ultimate boondoggles that came about in 2008, 2009. First was the TARP program, T-A-R-P. Excuse my accent, but I have to spell it out for everybody. I don't mean T-O-P, TARP. And that's when they gave the money to the banks to bail out the banks so that the stocks wouldn't go to zero and everybody can get their bonuses and they could go out and get bigger and stronger. But the other one was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And just to go through with that with you, by the way, I'm going to talk about energy today in the Department of Energy, and they get about $40 billion a year for a couple of years to fund projects to get the economy going again. And that's what we're going to talk about. It was boondoggle after boondoggle. And they didn't even know how to run it right. But it's time. Everyone should have to stop and say, okay, let's take a side issue right here. Not side, but do you remember where all this money went? This is $840 billion of your money. 131 to individual tax credits for first-time home buyers, which did nothing. Nothing except put money in some people's pocket. Making work pay was $104 billion, a tax credit for working individuals. These are all short-term things that affected nothing. We would live 5 years later, and we were missing about 10 million jobs because these were all short-term programs that did nothing but increase the deficit by between the two of them, nearly $2 trillion. Tax incentives for businesses, $32 billion. Manufacturing and economic recovery, $7 billion. Education got $93 billion. We know a lot of this went to just funding teachers in states. Transportation got $39 billion. We got to do a show on that. Infrastructure got $33 billion. We're broadband. And by the way, does everybody have broadband? Doesn't seem like anybody got any of the broadband. I mean, it doesn't seem like anybody did anything with the infrastructure. If you were going to do anything with the $840 billion, you would have improved the infrastructure of America, would have put a lot of people to work, building roads, getting our systems up again, having the whole country have Wi-Fi, whatever. Anyway, I could go on all day about this. Unemployment insurance programs. They're extending it again. Unemployment's down to 7%. They're going to extend unemployment benefits, and Republicans and Democrats are both going to vote for it. You got economic recovery payments. This is payments just to Social Security beneficiaries. But some of the money went to energy. And what did they do with the money that went to energy? I mean, first, and by the way, as we're talking about it, well, they wasted. They wasted almost all of it. Almost all of it got wasted. I mean, some people got filthy rich over it. From the Department of Energy loans that were made, hundreds of them. Some people got rich, but almost all of it, for your standpoint, was wasted. And by wasted, I mean, if we had taken $40 to $80 billion in a new Manhattan project that I just spoke about from 1942, and we woke up and all this raw research and scientists were working somewhere in America that wasn't political, and they'd come up with a solar panel that got prices down another 50% and passed what we call grid parity. In other words, cheaper than the combination of what we use now, which is nuclear, coal, natural gas, was cheaper. Well, then we look up and say, well, that research, that worked. Look, we're going to be totally energy independent. Not even close. These loans that were made, and we'll go through them probably in the next segment, but I want to get to one thing. In fact, it's on the icon that Boss put up, a little green car. But one of them and I looked at the green car and I went to try to find the green car where we got I don't do all the icons for the show and produce, all the stuff for it. But I went to look at it and I looked up. Chrysler receives $70 million in a Department of Energy grant to produce 220 plug-in pickup trucks and minivans. And I remember thinking last summer, I think I saw one of these. And the battery's on the back of this truck. And picture a pickup truck where you put, a 5x8 or whatever pieces of wood in, and I put hay in mine and so forth. And picture the car, the truck, with like almost all of the space used as a truck, loading stuff. Almost all of it missing because it's got these giant things in the back. I guess they're plug-ins. That's how you plug it in. It's not even really a truck. It's just an extra heavy 5-person passenger car. And I've been trying to look, and I looked everywhere. I can't find that they're in mass production of these things. And then I think to myself, we know Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors. When General Motors is a whole other show. Chrysler got bought up by an Italian company. Ford managed to build up enough cash before 2008 and staved off it. Stock went to about $1.20. Today it's about $16. But why would Chrysler need $70 million? all we did was let them build 220 plug-in vehicles. But this is what goes on with your money. It goes on every day. And I think we got to dig into the specifics of it. The solution is so obvious. It's not like a surprise thing at the end of the show. Hey, we got to do away with this part of the Department of Energy. And I don't think Americans have a big problem like putting a man on the moon in the 60s with Kennedy, or the Manhattan Project. If we all said, okay, we're going to figure out this specific problem with raw research and the best scientists, and we're going to come back to you within 5 years or 8 years and have it solved. Solar power being, that's probably the most promising one we'll talk about. Anyway, Steve Laffey at Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're talking today about the boondoggle that is the Department of Energy, why it has to basically be closed down, stuff transferred to the military, to the EPA, and we can talk about the raw research that needs to be done in this country to make the economy, well, for national defense purposes, to get our troops out of the Middle East. We can talk about that. But we love you following us on Facebook. We think that's great. We're Laffey Radio at Facebook, liking us on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. We can follow us there. We put up stuff every day. The Laffey Minute went up today talking about the Department of Energy. That you can spread around, like the show that will go up in the air after we're done. You can play it on our app. We have our self-loading app. I was playing one over the weekend, and we're going to try to find a radio one for you, too, which is radio. We're streaming a lot of data to you, we know. Anyway, we'll take a break, and we'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
The call to serve. It has no sound, yet I have heard it in the whispered retelling of honorable sacrifices made by those who have served before me. The call to serve has no form, yet I have clearly seen it in the eyes of men and women infinitely more courageous and more driven than most. The call to serve has no weight, yet I have held it in my hands. I will commit to carry it close to my heart until my country is safe and the anguish of those less fortunate has been soothed. The call to serve is at once invisible and always present. And for those who choose to answer the call, for their country, for their fellow man, for themselves, it is the most powerful force on earth. America's Navy, a global force for good.
Students, when I call the reason for your absences throughout the years, please exit the auditorium without your high school diploma. Too tired, family trip, sick day, starting the holidays early.
Starting in the 6th grade, students who miss 18 days or more of school in a year for any reason will fall behind and risk not graduating high school. How many days of school has your child missed this year? Absences add up. Keep track at boostattendance.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
Well, I finally did it. I opened a 401k.
What? Why? Just wait for the inheritance. We've definitely got a rich uncle somewhere. We're one call away from the winner's circle at the Derby, dinners with multiple forks, a vacation home in the country, using summer as a verb.
You don't actually think that, do you?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs, the Rhode Island Society of CPAs, and the Ad Council.
Stephen Chu unfortunately survived his Senate grilling, and I think that may have taken the steam out of the Republicans on this issue. But the amount of glad handing that went on from all branches of the government, from every department, the IRS gave Solyndra customers a special break where if they painted their roof white, they could count the roof as solar equipment and get some kind of tax break on that. There was massive pressure on the U.S. Navy to buy these things. I mean, and these are cylindrical glass panels that are going to break if it hails. If you have sleet, the thing's going to get smashed, and the Navy is supposed to use it to defend our country. And all of this happened. None of it can be tied directly to a meeting with George Kaiser.
Hey, Steve Laffey, we're back at Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We appreciate you tuning in, and we know the growing audience that we have. We're very, very appreciative of it. We're trying to put together a different show. You know, I was listening to some radios. I drove around this morning, and I'm like, I can't even listen. Not to make fun of particular people or talk show hosts, but we're trying to learn things here. And I've had a great many of you call in, and send me emails and so forth about you learning something. I was on the phone last night with a buddy of mine saying he didn't know anything about one of the shows we did. And I think that it's very important that we go over a lot of these things in our departments, where they are, and we're talking today about the Department of Energy as a specific department. And you just heard, by the way, the comments about, it's Stephen Chu, who was at the time, and in 2009 became the Secretary of Energy in America. And his background, by the way, Stephen Chu's background, is sort of an odd background. But what they really wanted to focus on was climate change. They got the money from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and they took about 40, by any estimation, $40 to $80 billion of your money, and just threw it down a hole where there was no improvement. And Solyndra is the most famous example of what's happened. And in the timeline, Solyndra, by the way, was, just that people don't know, they made solar panels. And they made cylindrical panels of copper, indium, gallium, selenite, thin film solar panels based in California. And they ended up, in fact, if you look at the timeline, I went back and tried to find one and put one together about Solyndra. Trying to force the U.S. Navy. Can you imagine the U.S. Navy having solar panels in the front of a battleship? Does anybody picture what that looks like? How would you use that? Painting your roofs white. I mean, these people were panicked. You heard the name George Kaiser mentioned, by the way, and we won't go into him because there's just so many people to go into. He'll never get indicted. Wealthy businessman, didn't need the money. They got the money from the Department of Defense, $500 and some odd million of your money, and it all went to zero. But to go back over a timeline of just one of these type investments, it's important. It's important to see how fast these things happen. As someone who was, invested in technology, ran a relatively small and helped start up, along with Alan Morgan, who really started up, but a couple of venture capital operations, early stage fund, a later stage fund back in the late 90s at Morgan Keegan down in Tennessee, but was the guy in charge of them for a while I was still there. It's tough to make good investments. It's actually early stage funds. But does the U.S. government have to be making early stage funds, loans? Listen to this. Solyndra was formed in 2005. It applied for a guaranteed loan under the Bush administration. In 2009, it won a conditional loan. That's March of 2009. They lent these people in September 2009. OMB approves the loan. Vice President Biden, Stephen Chu, CHU, who's the head of the Department of Energy, they go to the groundbreaking 3 days later. September 2009, October, November, December, January, February, March. 6 months later, after getting $500 million, auditors raised concerns about whether Solyndra can continue operating. That's when memos started flying around after that. And we've got some of the memos exist about how President Obama shouldn't show up at any of these events, shouldn't talk about it. People knew then it was going to zero. Zero. And I get aghast by the $500 million. Anytime it's, $50, I'm aghast. If someone loses $50, I lost $100 at the bank one night. I don't know where I put it. Sorry, I lost $500 at the bank one night. $500. I didn't know where I put the money. $500. It was a good amount of money. But a lot more to me when I was in my 30s, and not quite as much to me today by the grace of God. But it was, I had to go back the next day. $500. I went back the next day. It was a Friday night. They thought maybe the janitors. I didn't accuse anybody. What had happened to it? I withdrew some money right when there. $500. I was apoplectic. I was out of my mind. I kept telling my wife, "I'm so sorry." She said, "Don't worry about it." I said, "No, I'm worried. I never had lost any money. I hadn't lost any money in my life." It's like 2 years ago. About a year ago, I pulled out a pair of pants, a pair of khakis that were hanging on a hanger. And the back pocket looked a little lumpy, and I pulled out $500. I went back into the bank and said, I didn't mean to accuse anybody, and I didn't accuse anybody. And the lady remembered, by the way, this lady. She was still there. I said, do you remember I lost this $500? She goes, yeah. I didn't lose it. Somehow, I know I didn't put it. I know I didn't put it in the back pocket. I never put anything in my back pockets. So for me, $500 is a lot of money. What's $500 million? And what could $500 million do? So Solyndra, the most famous of these bankruptcies, in 6 months after they got the money, people know they were going broke. March of that year, Obama donors warned the president, don't visit Solyndra. December, the Solyndra executives learned the company is totally out of cash. It's another April, May, June, 9 months, right? This isn't much money, especially when these companies, and this just gets at a lot of what's going on, especially when these companies don't either have a business plan or a way of operating that they can even say we're cash flow generating for another year or 2 years. Generally, these high-tech companies try to get as much money as they can as quickly early on. Some don't, but that's a model that a lot of them use, where they try to get as much early on, and then when things go wrong, they still have cash. In Solyndra's example, obviously, from the startup of the company to getting the $500 million, they were nowhere in a position to deserve the $500 million. Now, there were a lot of Obama donors, high-tech people involved in Solyndra. It's another thing, when you look back in the Department of Energy, it's hard to find. It's like looking at the IRS. It's like looking at a lot of these departments. It's looking at the banks who made the fraudulent loans and the individuals who knew they made these loans, the individuals at giant investment banks who packaged the loans, who sold them to unsuspecting investors. And we still, on these two hands, we couldn't add up the number of people that went to jail. Well, we know just in the 1980s, not that long ago, over 1,000 people went to jail for the credit crisis and the savings and loans disaster. But we can't find enough people. We can't find anybody. And at the Department of Energy, someone had to know, or and it's almost worse, that they just didn't care. They don't care about your money. And when you look at, you say, oh, this must be a Democratic problem. No. This is a government problem. This is a federal problem. It's both parties. I just explained to you that George Bush had a program called Future Gen that added up to nothing, and they spent billions. Nothing. I'll have to go see where that place is in Illinois now. What's there? Or maybe there's something there. I didn't look farther into it once they decided to move, but nothing's happened on clean coal except when you change administrations, you get one administration's going to shut down coal. The other one was trying to encourage it. Do you see why the economy doesn't expand at a rapid rate? People who are investors are like, here comes 2016. Maybe we'll get somebody who will like coal. Maybe that's the investment. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll like this. Maybe they'll like that. How do I really invest? Why am I investing? That's the problem. That's one of the big problems we have in America. But look back on, this goes back a couple of years. They don't take a vote on this every year. This is 2012. And so 127 Republicans and 155 Democrats defeated an amendment introduced by Dennis Kucinich, who we read about all the time, by the way. He's a wacko left-wing guy, but at least here, this is also Republican out of California, Representative Tom McClintock, that would have shut down the loan guarantee programs at the Department of Energy, the program that made the Solyndra loan. We're going to talk about the 35 other ones. In fact, I may have to read the list to you just so you can hear the names of companies whose investors were at least enriched for a while. Some got out whole, but you and me and the taxpayers of America got totally taken and we got nothing. But you got lawmakers who want it, 127 Republicans, almost the same amount as Democrats. Why? You've got lawmakers, you've got the investment bankers, and you've got the companies. And they're all donating to congressional campaigns. And you've got people who want something in their own district, and they're going to fight like heck for this one project in their own district. It could be windmills over here in Weld County. It could be Solyndra in California. It could be Abound Solar, another Colorado disaster. By the way, another pollution disaster, We'll talk about it to the break when we come back. But you've got a situation where it's both parties, and it's going to take a president. It will not happen. It will not happen from a congressional. There is nothing more obvious than talking about these guaranteed loan programs in the Department of Energy that shouldn't be happening. First of all, the guys who run it, they're not venture capitalists. They don't pick winners and losers good or well. They've done a disastrous job. We've lost billions of dollars. Well, we'll be back in a little bit. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. The Department of Energy is on my topic today. We thanks so much for all the growth of what's happening here. We want you to tell people about the show too. LaffeyRadio.com is the place to go. There's a lot of things you can get there. The Fixing America presents, the Laffey Minute, the show itself, which you can play anytime when we're through. But we'll take a quick break right now. We'll be back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. It's like tiny nails in the air poke my lungs. I start to cough. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital.
Today, 1 out of 13 children suffer from some form of asthma, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all emergency room visits.
I feel like I'm choking. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. A little whistle sound comes out when I breathe.
But while your child may suffer from asthma doesn't have to make your child suffer. There are simple ways you can prevent your child's next attack. To learn more, log on to www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA, the Ad Council, and this station.
I'm in almost every school bus and classroom. I go to school with your children. We say the Pledge of Allegiance together. You see me around the neighborhood and you tell me that I'm a pretty good kid. Well, I'm 1 out of every 5 children in America, and I'm struggling with hunger. This problem is closer than you think. My teacher tells me we can grow up to be whatever we want. I want to grow up to be someone who doesn't go to bed hungry. There's enough food in this country to feed everybody. Please visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank for ways to help. Every dollar you donate helps provide 8 meals for kids like me, quietly struggling with hunger. Together, we are Feeding America. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
Thank you for coming, Secretary Chu. Have you met George Kaiser?
I think I might have at a roundtable meeting.
More than once?
The only one I can recall at the time was during a roundtable.
Are you concerned about the propriety of giving money, $500 million to a billionaire, and then sort of changing the rules some so he gets to, maybe get a better deal than the taxpayers do?
I'm convinced. Nothing I've seen in the loan program or anything in the White House had that any connection that George Kaiser had with raising the money had anything to do with the selection of the loan.
Ha, I say. Of course it did. They're talking about George Kaiser. That's Senator Rand Paul out of Kentucky grilling Stephen Chu, the former head from like 2009 till sometime this summer, earlier this year, where another guy named Ernie Moniz, both came out of MIT, by the way, Stephen Chu background. None of these people have a background in running anything. They might have been brilliant scientists on one topic. Chu, I think, maybe been part of winning a Nobel Prize. So these guys have big brain power. I met it. Listen, I went to Harvard Business School. Across the street was MIT. There's a lot of people over there. They They're stumbling down the street. I mean, they're wonderful engineers. Their brain is huge on differential equations and time speed and stuff I don't understand at all. But they literally stumble down the street because they can't drive a car. I mean, so Stephen Chu, I'm not accusing him of that. But, you know, his big thing, by the way, is not just climate change. His big thing in life is the new glucose economy. And I don't mean to laugh. Listen, it could work, but I don't know enough about it. But he spent most of his life on the glucose economy, a form of low-carbon economy, obviously low carbon, no pollution, where we're going to have glucose farms in tropical plants around the equator. That energy is going to be put on a boat, I guess fueled by glucose, and shipped up here to America so we don't have any more pollution. If ethanol doesn't work, which it truly doesn't work, and I haven't even looked into it, I'm sure they've gotten all their loans from the Department of Energy, right? The last 4 or 5 years. But if that doesn't work, how is glucose going to work? But this is what this guy spends his time on. So when someone's asking what a great job he's done, in fact, let's go. I didn't play any of these clips. Here's one. Here's Senator Congressman Issa out of California grilling Chu, asking him if he thinks he's doing a good job. Let's see what Stephen Chu says. Now, I've told you about the billions of dollars that at least $40 billion down the drain. $40 billion by one guy making loans with your money from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act that never should have happened anyway. At $40 billion. What? $40 billion could have saved Detroit. They went to sell their artwork if they had $40 billion. But here he is. Here's Chu. What grade do you think he gives himself?
Controlling the cost of gasoline at the pump, do you give yourself an A-?
Well, the tools we have at our disposal are limited, but I would say I would give myself a little higher in that since I became a Secretary of Energy, I've been doing everything I can to get long-term solutions.
By the way, that's it. The last part of this clip, brilliant clip, boss. He's asked about the price at the pump. The man says, he has billions of dollars at his resources. He has very limited control. But the real purpose for starting in 1977, the Department of Energy, was to make us energy independent. 77, 87, 97, 2007, 2012. 36 years ago. And we're not. So here's a different way. If I had my druthers, I'd get people in a room. I'd go back to the American people like Kennedy did, John F. Kennedy, not Ted, like John F. Kennedy did, and say, here's a project that's ultimately extremely important. And we've got to do it not because it's easy, it's hard. And here's how we're going to make this thing work. And when I'm going to ask you for an additional appropriation, Congress, not just spending money willy-nilly, not the imperial presidency. We need X billions of dollars, and I've got it written down how much we need. And it's going to be right on budget. And if we do this, we can be energy independent. Okay, on some project. Solar is the most promising. Instead of today giving money out to companies that we don't get any step further. Now, solar is, as I've said before, and I've said before on shows, solar is already taken off. Solar doesn't need any more of these loans from the Department of Energy. Solar is going to take off, and in 20, 30 years, it's going to surpass oil and gas in this country, in this world. Because we get so much, in fact, we played a clip before. I'm going to play it again. We played this clip before. I want to play it again. If I had to put somebody in charge of the Department of Energy, I put someone, an optimist about how to improve things, so someone who has a business background. Here's this guy, Salim Ismail. You've heard him before on one of my shows when we talked about solar and we talked about energy. But listen to what he has to say about solar.
This is solar energy. Now, the good news here, we tend to be kind of worried about technology sometimes, is solar energy is one of those things that's actually doing really well. Solar energy has hit that exponential curve, and it's doubling in its price performance every 22 months today. So today it's 0.12% of world energy supply. 2 years ago it was 0.06. In 2 years it'll be 0.25%. 2 years after that it'll be 0.5%. 2 years after that it'll be 1%. And then we're 7 doublings away, or about 16 to 20 years from 100% coverage. Because if you add up all of the energy and all of the fossil fuels in the entire world, it adds up to about 5 days of sunlight hitting the world. And that shifts the conversation instantly from a scarcity problem to a conversion problem. Right? And once you have decent energy, then desalinization, all sorts of other things become a lot more manageable. So on the energy side, we think in a couple, 2 to 3 decades, we will actually have abundant energy. We do not have an energy crisis coming along. And we've noticed, importantly, that once any technology hits that information enablement curve, it stays on that path. So these technologies are disseminated, they're distributable enough that it happens no matter what.
And that's where we are in solar. That's a guy who helped develop Yahoo. He works over in California. I saw him actually speak one time, and I totally agree with him. This information enablement curve, it's sort of like talking about Moore's law, which is talking about semiconductors and the fact that when you double the output or every certain amount of time, the price of Intel chips are going down by half, which is one of the reasons that you can pick up a computer these days, which is 10 times more powerful than 6 years ago and cost half as much. And it continues to happen to the point where you can't even believe that you're going to get a smaller, better, faster, 10 times more powerful computer. And that's what's starting to happen to solar. Half of 1% to 1% and so forth. So these people who are at the Department of Energy, President Obama, the congressman, they know nothing about this, I guess. They're just going to keep making loans. And listen to some of the loans they've made. In fact, it's important to go back I went back and tried to find out just before Solyndra, before another company, Abound Solar. And by the way, there's dozens of these companies. In the next break, next part, I'm going to read some off to you. You won't believe it. So you go back and say, well, gosh, I wonder if these guys were putting money into renewable energy, Department of Energy people putting money into guaranteed loans, by the way. I wonder if they were doing it because nobody else would do it. I wonder if they thought that would be the best way to get, it's jump-started, to get, let's call it just solar for a minute. It could be wind. It could be all these other companies they invested in. I wonder if they just looked back and said, well, the venture capital community, the guys, venture capital, by the way, the people who invest, generally speaking, in the startups of America. By the way, you're a venture capitalist if you gave a friend $10,000 to start a grocery store. But in Silicon Valley, over around 128 Circle, down near Austin, Texas, where primarily in New York City, obviously, where the financiers are. But listen to this. Venture capitals pumped $4.5 billion into green technologies in 2009, and they did it every year before that for 4 years. The leading green tech investment segment at more than $1.4 billion in 84 deals. Solar was $1.4 billion of that $4.5 billion. So in the fourth quarter of 2009, by the private sector, not by Barack Obama, not by the Department of Energy, not by George Bush with his future generation. There's 30 or 40 companies on this list. Here's Cambrios, transparent conductive film for thin film solar panels, got $14.5 million. Solaria got $7 million. You never heard of these companies. By the way, you may never heard of any of them. They may merge. They may be sold out. They may fail. But it's the private sector making these types of investments. GlassPoint Solar, a solar thermal equipment to provide industrial process heat. They got $1 million from venture capitalists. I get one all day. Topoga Energy, renewable energy, PPA services to commercial, government, and nonprofits. Got $20 million in round B. So this is what the normal companies do, By the way, they talk about Solyndra here. Start early, raise a lot of money, innovate big, and get government funding as a potential winning strategy. So the private sector knew this is a potential winning strategy. Companies like NanoSolar, which I'd never heard of, and IPO-bound Solyndra, IPO-bound. They thought it was going to go public in 2010, just as it got its money. It went broke. They raised more than $1.2 billion between the two of them before the government got involved. It goes on and on. Here's one about Abound Solar, which I got to talk to you about. I'm going to run out of time. Abound Solar is attempting to become the second solar. Perhaps the trick to being a winning solar company is just picking the right absorber material. So that's what they were trying to do. They had raised $100 million before they got, they ended up taking $70 million of the $400 million loan guarantee before they went belly up here in Colorado and brought down a lot of people around them and left the place a environmental disaster, which nobody on the left talks about. In fact, no one talks about it at all. By the way, all these companies that were involved in solar, they'll all talk about, there's another point to be made. Maybe one of the reasons the venture capitalists wanted to get government money was the price of solar had actually gone to make the price of actual solar panels had gone up. The inputs had gone up. And so people started doing thin film. And so then we ran into a situation where, for whatever reason, it could have been Chinese dumping, the prices fell precipitously. But that's the private sector's deal. Where was this money being given wasn't for raw research to plummet the cost of solar. The money given to all these companies like Abound Solar, Solyndra, dozens and dozens of other ones, to the tune of $40-some-odd billion. They were done to take that product and get it to the next level, to have enough cash flow. When they've already been proven that you heard the tape, by the way, with George Kaiser, billionaire, was getting bailed out through the investment in Solyndra. By the way, back to that clip of Stephen Chu, he gave himself like an A+. Why? Because like many government officials and people who have worked their lives in the academic world, because he basically says he was trying really hard. That's not what we do in the private sector. Anyway, we're going to run out of time. We got one more break. It's Steve Laffey. It's Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're at LaffeyRadio.com. Check us out there. Spread it around. We appreciate it. We'll be back with one more segment. Bye-bye.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
I am an American soldier.
I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place this first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself.
I am an expert and I am a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army Strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
Picture this, your next trip, Utah, 5 national parks. First, Zion. You're walking, the ground rises, the ground drops, the ground becomes water. Next, Bryce. You're riding a mule. You're riding a mule under giant orange strip castles. You are not dreaming. You will not forget this. On to Capitol Reef. Take the scenic route, the really scenic route. Take a path you've never taken and see the stars for the first time. Now for Canyonlands. You're riding a bike. You're riding a bike on Mars. Now you're riding the rapids. Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, Classic. Arches, 5:32 a.m. Some things are worth racing the sunrise for. The horizon lightens. You round the corner. Whoa. This is Life Elevated. The Mighty 5. 5 iconic parks, 1 epic experience. Plan your trip at visitutah.com.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
Hi, I'm Secretary of Energy Ernie Moniz. We've always been a nation of innovators and inventors. Today, as we tackle urgent challenges like climate change, we are again looking to our brightest scientists, students, and entrepreneurs to help build a clean energy economy. In that spirit, I'm pleased to announce the American Energy Data Challenge. We invite you to share your ideas through a series of 4 challenges that combine open data and energy innovation. We need your help to make available data easier to access, simpler to use, and more applicable for consumers. The tools you build can empower American consumers to use energy more efficiently, letting families and businesses make informed decisions about the energy they use and purchase in daily life.
Oh my gosh. So Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And we've got, that was Ernie Moniz, the new Secretary of Energy, Department of Energy. He is also from MIT. And he also has a wide background I should say a narrow background in academics. And he's won many awards. I listened to, and play it for you, but I listened to his entire speech when he was announced to come in. It's about an hour of him talking about climate change and so forth. And he's talking about it here in this clip. And clearly, he just has an agenda. But he, like the President of the United States, like seemingly all these people in government, he is so far removed from the private sector and human nature and how we operate in the world that he thinks that people are going to take these great ideas about energy efficiency, open systems, whatever he's talking about, open data, and send them to the federal government rather than going to the patent office. So who in their right mind is going to send in great ideas to the federal government? You could be sitting there right now saying, I got a great idea, this open data system. I got this new idea for energy efficiency. Are you going to send it to the federal government? That clip, well, there's another, we got to play several more, but that clip shows up how far removed he, and the clip before that, Stephen Chu, the former Secretary of Energy, are so far removed from how they should judge themselves, how people are going to operate. You can see through these comments, if they're appointed by the president, you can see how Obamacare came to be and how total disregard for how people operate, how humans operate, how the invisible hand of Adam Smith creates things, how Schumpeter talked about the creative destruction. They don't have any idea what we're talking about. And it gets worse, folks. I mean, it gets worse. Before we get through this show, we've got to play a couple more clips here. There's one, the one of all time. You know, you think some of these contracts, we've been talking at least about startups, or at least about companies that at least promised a future, that got loans from the Department of Energy. But that's not how it works. One of the most incredible things is the Secretary of Energy over in the Philippines with Shell Oil and the Philippines government giving money away in the Philippines. Listen to this.
The third, President of the Republic of the Philippines. Your Excellency, Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today we will witness the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding between Shell and the government through the Department of Energy. We have Mr. Edgar Chua, Country Chairman of Shell Companies in the Philippines, Mr. De Sosa, Senior Advisor for Shell Asia Pacific, Mr. Development, Construction and Operation by Shell of adjacent to the Shell Refinery in Batangas City.
All you really have to hear is the laughter at the end, like a sinister cartoon. They're getting the money. How could Shell ever be involved with any kind of situation with the Department of Energy? It's not an American company. These guys aren't in America. We don't have a video to show. We have the video. We didn't show you. We'll show you the audio. But listen to the laughter at the end. It's like people going, yeah, we got it now. I mean, it's like a mob scene at the end. You know, yeah, we're collecting the money now. And most of this money, we got a guy named Chris Gunn. Now, I'm not in favor of the small business people of America getting all these loans either, but he's the head of the American Small Business, and he's suing the Department of Energy. Listen to him, and listen to whether you believe that the loans that go to giant corporations like Bechtel, one of the biggest companies in America, in the world, you think they could be miscoded? Listen to this.
Hi, this is Chris Gunn here from the American Small Business League. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about our most recent lawsuit against the federal government, which was filed in federal district court just yesterday. The lawsuit filed against the Department of Energy was filed because the Department of Energy was refusing to release information on a $3.6 billion contract, small business contract, awarded to Bechtel that was actually coded as small in the socioeconomic field. This is just one example of a large company who had received a contract that was coded as a small business contract in either the socioeconomic field or in the contracting officer's business size determination. And it's just another example of a contract that in the past may have been awarded to and may have been counted towards the government's small business contracting goals. Since 2003, we've actually seen about a dozen federal investigations which have found fraud, abuse, loopholes, and a lack of oversight in small business contracting programs, which have led to the diversion of small business contracts to large companies. And unfortunately, for some time now, we've seen the administration, and actually the Small Business Administration specifically, taking the stance that these issues are actually the result of miscoding, harmless computer errors, and generally just simple human miscalculations. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We're actually looking at fraud. We're actually looking at abuse. And we actually think that we have companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Dell Computers, Starwood Hotels, Home Depot, Xerox, etc., continuing to receive small business contracts year after year. And in fact, year after year, those contracts continue to be counted towards the government's small business contracting goals.
So there you have it. I don't even know what else to add. We've done almost an hour. And it's nothing but complete look-you-in-the-face fraud. Small businesses, which are supposed to be getting some of this under the small business part of these loan programs, it's going to Bechtel. They mentioned Boeing, Dell Computer. Are they an energy company? I thought they were a computer company. Starwood Hotels. It's one of my classmates from business school ran that company. What would they be doing getting it? Are they putting solar? I mean, I don't know what they're doing. But this guy, Chris Gunn, clearly they weren't miscoded. Clearly it's something that all the people of Congress know about, and they all, as we said, they'll all vote to renew these programs. That's why the governor of Texas wanted this stuff going. It goes on and on. By the way, there's many, many companies. I mean, there's so many companies. I haven't get a chance to get to them, but just quickly, I could go on all day. We could go on for hours and hours about the companies themselves. Here's one, by the way. They gave a loan to A123. A123. This is one of the worst ones of all time. It got $249 million. Zippo went to zero. I don't know if the whole loan went to zero, because guess what happened to this company? They were bought out by a Chinese conglomerate. Well, I guess we'll know when they perfect that technology. Ecotality. Fatality is the name of the article. Got $115 million. Chapter 11. This is September 17th of 2013. So they're still going bankrupt. Over and over, these companies keep going bankrupt. They were supposed to put 1 million vehicles on, they were supposed to install electric vehicle charging stations. They installed 12,500 of them, I guess. They got $100 million from the government. Even if the government paid them, it's $8,000 a station. It probably cost $1,000 to put one of these up. I mean, you could go any company, pick a company. I mean, they're here. U.S. Geothermal, $37 million loan, broke. Fisker bankruptcy. Fisker made cars like Tesla. We'll go to Tesla in a second. We're going to run out of time. $139 million, broke. Here's a company, $42 million in a clean energy loan to a Michigan van company. They make vans for the disabled. I have nothing against the vans for the disabled. What was that doing? And then you ask the last question, because we're going to run out of time here. Well, Steve, what about Tesla? They loaned him $500 million and they got paid back. And this is where the whole thing breaks down. The people at the Department of Energy and Barack Obama, President Obama, are not smart enough to even understand that they should have taken equity kickers in every single loan that they never should have made. So if they had taken an equity piece, then at least they would have had some upside. Because what happened with Tesla, by the way, the man was a billionaire, a multi-billionaire. He didn't need the $500 million. He took it because it was low interest loan, and he beefed up his own equity position with it. He made more money because of it, and they simply paid back the federal government the money. And some people think before they were out of their covenants to avoid default on the way the covenant of the terms were of the loan. So they raised all this money because the stock took off to 100 and something. But if the federal government had simply just said, listen, not only are we making you a $500 million loan, we're taking 20% of the company. One, many of these loans wouldn't have been made. Two, that itself, I don't know exactly when it was made, but say it would have been a 30-to-1 return. And we could have taken in $40 billion in just that. And that's how venture capital actually works, especially with early stage companies. Most of them aren't going to work out. And it's that 130-to-1 return that's going to get all your money back for the other investments. But we don't even do that because that's not the purpose. The purpose is to give money to friends, put businesses in places where powerful congressmen work, right? Reward lawmakers, the congressmen and the senators. Get lawyers involved. Help out the investment banks who do all the work on it. That's what it's there for. And we're done. And we got to stop it. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We've been talking about the Department of Energy, and it has to be closed. Stuff has to be transferred. We'll be back tomorrow with another powerful show. Check us out at LaffeyRadio.com. Follow us on Facebook. God bless you. Talk to you tomorrow, America.
You've been listening to Steve Laffey's Fixing America radio program on the Laffey Radio Network. Fixing America is broadcast Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network, LLC is prohibited.